Thank you for being a part of the immensity of your love. Thank you for the gift of being able to love you, to love others, and to love this beautiful planet garden. Thank you, Father and Mother, for the gift of knowing, of seeing, of understanding your ways. Thank you for the awareness of your impeccable design throughout the cosmos, and for the privilege of joining you in the conscious caring of your creation. Thank you, Father and Mother, for the miracle of being alive. Thank you for the awareness that we are participating in an unfolding miracle with capacities made of this living miracle that give us direct access to this part of creation so we may share your pleasure. Amen. As I live my life in these days, I find I'm able to articulate my greatest passions, my purpose. And I'll do that in 3 parts. I live to worship you, O Lord. I yearn for focus in doing so, to share in communion with you. And I love to do this with other people. That's why I'm here. This, of course, easily fits into what we know together, that heaven and earth are one, that the kingdom of heaven is at hand, that mankind was placed eastward of Eden, that we are God beings in the garden, and that we are conscious of this identity. For some reason, I've been drawn again and again to read and meditate on the writings of Immanuel Velikovsky. And of course, this inevitably leads me back to the brilliance of Grace Van Dusen. And reading them and spending time with them is like sharing in the brilliance of the angelic mind. And it is something I totally keep returning to, and I love it. And so thankful for the priceless record that they left us. One story that has attracted me, and it insisted on being here this morning, is the story of the tale of King Solomon and the Queen of Israel, Hatshepsut of Israel, of Egypt. And I think you'll see why this story has come to us and still lingers. Historically, they were extraordinary figures on the world stage. They had great prominence in their time. And we know spiritually that they incarnated to play leadership roles at a time of critical opportunity. Egypt and Israel were in a time of peace, the first time in centuries. Other nations had been drawn to both of these nations, playing a part by offering tributes and trade being exchanged there was cooperation happening in that area. And these two focal points were very key. These two nations were very key in that. Egypt, for the first time, had a female pharaoh. And she was a formidable leader. Just to give you some context about this woman, she was the pharaoh, the ruler of Egypt, which of course was still a recipient of the vast store that had been left through the colonization by Atlantis. So there was still a lot of record of wisdom that was in Egypt, and this woman would have been educated in it. She shared her rulership at the beginning of her time with a man, but then it was turned over to her as the sole pharaoh, the first female pharaoh. But she was ready. She was ready for this. She was interested in lands beyond Egypt. One of the things that impresses me is that she built a navy. She had 2 fleets, and each ship in these fleets carried 50 men. So they were quite impressive. And she longed to see lands beyond her country. She was known to be a searcher of truth. Solomon, at this time, had reigned for 11 years in Palestine or Israel. Both were used. He was also a very unusual person. He was a student of the natural world. He amassed zoological and biological collections that his navy sent ships out all over the area, sometimes away for over a year, just to collect things from these far off countries. And then he would have these displayed and looked after in his palace. And he knew about them. He studied them. He was keen to know about the natural world. So the word kingdom really describes what he was ruling over. And this was due partly to his father, David, who had had such success in military operations, and he had brought so many countries, and with the tributes and with the wealth that was all centered in Israel. And so Solomon had the benefit of this. So he was poised for something truly amazing to happen through this particular center in time. Spiritually, Grace called Solomon's presence a focal point for the spirit of truth. And she emphasized that it wasn't just an intellectual thing in his studies, for instance, of the natural world, but he had a command of his emotions, his physicality, and she pointed out that he indeed was offering spiritual expression as a leader. He loved the Lord. And through him, if it had gone according to plan, this would have moved the entire pattern focused by Solomon into the second sacred school approach, plain approach. It was a very significant time. And he was in position actually to bring again under the Lord's love and command the Eden that he loved so much. So he was poised. His well-known prayer to God was that he would have an understanding heart. And the Lord did grant him this with the proviso that he did so because he had asked for an understanding heart before he asked for riches. So that was an ominous clue of a coming event. His main project was to complete David's wish, which was to build a temple to house the Ark of the covenant and the vessels, etc., that had been up until then taken care of in a traveling tent. And it was Solomon's wish that he would house the ark in a place with the finest qualities. He wanted it to be a place where the high priest and the priests could come and they could represent the kingdom, the people in the kingdom, before the altar and offer supplications on behalf of the people of the nation. It was a massive structure, as we are probably aware of. It was constructed with the most precious materials, fine woods, gold, silver, jewels embedded in walls. The two cherubs, which were poised over the the mercy seat, were huge. They were 15 feet high, and they had a wingspan of 34 feet, and they were pure gold. Very impressive. The front of the temple had a series of terraces, which were planted with myrrh. So there would be this fragrance coming from them. And there was a path cut up through the terraces that the high priest and the priesthood would go up singing psalms at each level. When the vessels and the ark were brought into the temple, when it was consecrated, Solomon declared before the congregation of all Israel, spreading his hands towards heaven, Lord God of Israel, there is no God like thee in heaven above or earth beneath. Interestingly, on this occasion, it was written, and it came to pass when the priests were come out of the holy place, that the cloud filled the house of the Lord, so that the priests could not stand to minister because of the cloud. For the glory of the Lord had filled the house of the Lord. And Grace pointed out that that would be evidence of the cloud of Shekinah had appeared. Meanwhile, back in Egypt, one day the queen was going to worship in her temple, the sun god that she worshiped, and she received a message. Humorously, it came through a bird, but this was a profound experience for her. And she was instructed to go to the land of Punt, which was the land of God, which was Palestine, Israel. And she took this very, very seriously. She felt this was something that was moving in her and that was very important to her rulership and to her personally. So from Thebes, where she was located, she went across land over to the Red Sea, got in one of her boats, one of 5 boats of her Red Sea fleet, and crossed over the Red Sea, which was fairly dangerous at that time. It could have storms. Went up into a little gulf off the Red Sea, got off there, and then she proceeded on a caravan of camels, which were laden with spices and gold and silver and fine timbers, fine woods. When she got to Punt, handsome manservants came out to greet her, and she was quite impressed with this. Solomon received her gladly, and it was said that he was studious to please her in all ways, in particular by mentally grasping with ease the ingenious problems she set him. She proved him with hard questions. And after her time with Solomon, she said, it was a true report that I heard in mine own land of thy acts and of thy wisdom, until I came and mine own eyes had seen it. And behold, the half was not told me. Thy wisdom and prosperity exceeded the fame which I had heard. When she saw Solomon ascend that path through the myrrh terraces, it was said that she said that there was no spirit left in her. It took her breath away. I also found interesting that as a leader, observing another leader in his nation and his kingdom, she commented, "Happy are thy men, happy are these thy servants." This made an impression. When she returned to Thebes by her Mediterranean fleet, laden with immense amount of gifts that Solomon had given to her, she got home and she immediately began construction of her own temple. She called it the Splendid of Splendors, and we probably have seen photographs of, or maybe the actual temple in the Valley of the Kings. It mimicked the myrrh terraces of Punt with terraces of the exotic trees that Solomon had given her. But most interesting, she also instituted in her temple the service of the high priest with 12 priests of the priesthood that were in front of the congregation and in front of the altar, and they presided over the ceremony. She was so impressed with this experience that she had with Solomon and this journey that in this temple, she put on the walls a depiction of the journey, which is very interesting because you can actually go and see an account of what happened, including the handsome manservants are up there. She was quite impressed with those. And for one reason, they actually physically look different. The race in Israel and Palestine had different features than the Egyptians. The temple represented how life comes to focus in such a symbol called the temple. In this story, the physical kingdom of Solomon was represented in the temple. All the materials were from his kingdom. The money that had come in to build it were all from the people in his kingdom. The people were very invested in this temple. It was part of them. It wasn't just a building. Their whole interest and soul was invested in this building. There was a great deal of attention paid to it. And this was all part of Solomon's tool that he had to bring his kingdom into another level of consciousness. Of course, the Ark of the Covenant was extremely significant to them. It carried the history of their people, and the high priest and the Levites would bring the substance of all this to point to a level in the service, and this would be offered up in the temple. Solomon himself said, "But will God indeed dwell on earth? Behold, the heaven and the heavens of heavens cannot contain thee. How much less this house that I have builded?" He had an understanding of the Lord. The temple was completed in the 11th year of his 40-year reign, but as we know, the pattern did not succeed. Solomon lost his polarity that he had in communion with the Lord. He lost his integrity as a true representative of the people in the temple because he turned his polarity towards the pagan practices of a number of his wives. In the interest of being a cosmopolitan kingdom, Solomon had invited many nations and cults with practices that were not of his nature. But he wanted to accommodate things that were different. And his wives, of course, appealed to him that they be able to continue their worship of their their various gods, and he allowed them to. In fact, he actually went and worshipped at these various shrines of his foreign wives. And so the whole kingdom lost its integrity. It was weakened, and uprisings broke out within the country and without the country. And in eventual time, the great nation of Palestine was crumbling. In Egypt, there was also an unfortunate outcome. The successor to the queen was a man who had witnessed this journey over to Punt, and he had seen the gifts and heard about the gifts that, or heard about the wealth in Palestine, and he wanted them. He wanted the wealth, and he wanted more. He was actually a very aggressive conqueror. He ended up invading Israel, sacking the temple, bringing back all the vessels, all the furniture, etc., back to Egypt, and not understanding the significance at all. In fact, he made a big inventory of them. He was very proud of what had come back. The refined consciousness that had compelled Hatshepsut as a leader to seek out Solomon was dissipated instead of the story, and instead of the stories of her journey. Oh, sorry, forget that. I feel for the queen. She came to Solomon with keen interest. She felt she was divinely instructed to do this by her God. She brought intelligence and willingness, the feminine, to him, so her people could prosper under Solomon's wisdom. So the negative aspect in both countries was actually denied the union that they were seeking. The people, the priesthood even, were denied that communion with what was higher, with what represented the Lord. It was an unfortunate turn in the spiritual plan that the Lord had very carefully prepared, and it was a great loss. The integrity of the temple, it was broken, and that magical means of God's control by communing in that sacred space through the Lord's representatives and his priesthood was dissipated, and it no longer was functioning. One implication to this story for me is, as I mentioned, Spirit has gone through a lot of preparation in order to get the right people in correct alignment with his plan, with the right capabilities for the job. They have to have the capabilities as well. Solomon was a big example of this, and a good example of how it went off the rails. David Barnes pointed out to me that the story of the fall is basically just that. It's a story from long, long ago. But the story of Solomon is actually something that occurred within recorded history. And that's very interesting. We can actually see the fall repeated. And that provides us with some information. Solomon's story also reminds me, you and I here, of what we do in our services is important and significant. We know when we touch the hem of the garment, or see the light, or feel the fire, because everything comes to focus. And in that focus, it opens up into a communion. I have been feeling the pressure of Spirit, as you can imagine, stepping into this position. As anyone who has done this knows this. One of the other prophetesses of you said to me that they were metaphorically holding up my arms, just like Aaron and Hur did with Moses. And that was really sweet, humorous. I'm not Moses. To bring it to specifics for me, I had a particularly intense week this week. I had a health catharsis, you might say, and it brought me into contact with health practitioners who showed me their incredible intelligence, skills, and their kindness. And as I was preparing for this morning, I was realizing that I was bringing the substance of those interactions with me into this temple. And then when I thought about it further, I realized that I wasn't just bringing last week's experiences. I was bringing last month's experiences. I was indeed bringing the experiences of my entire life, the substance, the fine, high, wonderful substance, which is part of each of us, comes into this place when we come. But particularly when you're the point, which is providing a focus, you are very aware, at least I am, of what I am actually bringing here, the wealth that I am bringing of my life, but with the lives with all of you. This is what happens in the temple. Lives are actually placed on the altar with passion and with thanksgiving. A space is opened up in heaven, and there is love flowing into it. Do you feel that? Do you feel that in your own times of sanctification? When you do bring something to focus, but paradoxically, something opens up into great spaciousness, and it's filled. It's filled primarily, you feel the love. And often when that love is being experienced, you begin to think clearly. Things become revealed. I call this communing with God. When we bring our lives and our substance to the temple and place it on the altar, you might say that this is representing the people to God. But how do we represent God to the people? I was going to entitle this service, How Things Get Done. Because when our attention is turned away from the world of effects and given to the one whom we love, this creates a space, an actual spiritual space in which the Lord can do what he needs to do. And when that happens in our communion and becomes understood at various levels in our consciousness, that can impact and go out into the world. It might be a vibrational outpouring. Sometimes it's an actual instruction. But the main thing to remember, I think, is that we cannot try to guess what that is going to be. This is not a transactional action we have with God. This is something that is magically occurring in communion. Isn't it interesting that in stories of the Bible that you have people speaking to God and the Lord said, well, I think that this actually does happen. It doesn't happen by, well, maybe it happens by hearing a voice, but it often happens when one is in the sanctified space that something comes out of your mouth, perhaps in a comment. And it's sometimes startling. It's like, where did that come from? Well, it came from that cloud. It came from that magical place that we experience individually, but we can also experience collectively. I find this very applicable, by the way, in terms of dealing with the world the way it is. There is a lot happening in the world, as we know, including with Israel and Palestine and Ukraine and Russia and the American election, all these things. But I'm finding that if I turn my attention away from what I would call the realm of effects and remove the concern about that, keeping my eye on the happenings, but instead enter into a place of worship, of thankfulness, of gratefulness, that another space opens up. And I know that that particular moment, I am actually impacting all those events. Right now, there are a number of temples, you might say, up and running. And sometimes I think, I wonder if there's supposed to be one temple. Why wouldn't there be? I mean, we're all worshiping the one God. I'm sure this thought has occurred to you too. But here's where I've arrived at that. It's not a transactional thing. It's not a thing that's going to be manipulated. The only way this wonderment can be usefully dealt with is to continue to generate that finer place, that place filled with love and filled with the intelligence that comes in that, seeing things in your own life in a whole different way. Will you not see larger things in a whole different way too? But it only comes when it's time. And that's been very reassuring to me. In other words, trust spirit. We've said this so often, but I feel we're understanding more of, you might call it the mechanics of that, the way that actually happens. If we are going to actually commune with God, is that not a most exceptional experience? And it is a conversation, you might say. So this is what I wanted to bring into this particular temple here with us. Looking at the story of a temple that was built a long time ago and some of the principles that happened, the people that were involved, and then bring it right back to us with huge gratefulness for the understanding that we have. I mean, back then, Solomon, although we might hold him in esteem, he was still sacrificing oxen and all sorts of animals. Like, he had so many, he couldn't even bring them into the temple. I mean, obviously, that's not what we're about. And we have had an opportunity to understand these things. And I am very grateful for what we have generated in the time since we were with one leader who was poised also to bring about a wonderful movement of a pattern. And we are the pattern, and we are the focal points. And we have the temple experience. So that's what I would offer. And I would open it up for any thoughts that have arisen in your hearts and in your minds to be shared.
And I love the outline you provided, but to bring it up to now that each of us is responsible for that sacred substance so we can feel a sense of spaciousness. I flew recently on a plane, and there was two big guys next to me, and I had the window seat, but I felt like there was still spaciousness within that setting. because I was looking to actually provide something of substance in that situation. But to know deeply in our hearts, this is what we're here for, to bring the sanctuary wherever we are. Thank you for your words.
And I want to thank you also for your words. It occurs to me that as I reflect how I coalesce the temple in my own living practice, and I was just reflecting on all of the different temples that I steward and coalesce, whether it's in relationship with this person or that one, or my beloved, or my temple home, where the practice is always right there to continue to refine and purify and coalesce the temple. But I really want to appreciate what you said about the one temple, and how it all of the temples are radial expressions of the one temple that is kept in my heart, in my relationship with the Lord of love, and how that really is the point of coalescence and expression for love through my facility. So thank you, Anne.
Yes, thank you, Anne. Surely our heart's desire is to let the Lord have his way in our living. He has made such a tremendous investment down through the ages in certain ones to let something come to point and move into victory. And our remarkable victory in the Lord paid a terrific price. And it's been the generation of his life and his legacy that has come to us in this day. While these are not children's games we play at all, in that temple of light and love, there is a lightness, there is the sense of assurance, and there is the sense of victory. To feel it oh so close with Solomon and Hatshepsut, and to have it just fall apart. Wow, that that took a lot of building back to get to this point in time, where once again I sense we are oh so close. Oh so close. Let us not be deceived. Let us not be distracted. Let us be about the Lord's business on earth. Not what I want. What would he like to see? Terrific consideration. Thank you.
And thank you for reminding us about the story of Solomon and the Queen of Egypt. It's a beautiful story, and part of it is feminine response and the presence of masculine representative of the Lord, and how there is an unseen force that would bring them together, to which they both responded. It's also a story of possibility and failure, as Deborah was mentioning. There have been many times in different ways that a plan has been set in motion to bring about the restoration of mankind. And inevitably, it's failed, either by those who were to provide the focus for this plan or those who came afterward. They became distracted, as was said. Different human wants and beliefs entered in, and what was present was dissipated. Here we have another opportunity, and it comes back to each of us to sustain what we know, that the truth is inviolate in each of us, and that together the different elements, the masculine, the feminine, the different ways of knowing union within ourselves and together can once again build the living temple, perhaps not in physical form right now because that cycle's past, but in another way with our spiritual expression, to be true to what we know individually and to not let us fail in the endeavor. For that is the only reason we are here right now, is to move through to victory, to do the job we've come to do and let nothing cause us to veer from that path and that purpose. So thank you for your presentation today and for all of you to be present.
That's so true, that we are here to sustain, maintain, and generate that exquisitely fine substance, no matter what happens. No matter what distractions human nature wants to tug at us, just let it go. There's no place for the distractions. There's no place to allow the human emotions that want to tug at us to find root, because everything that we are is a fluid, organic, loving, and powerful place of complete devotion to the One Most High. I too loved your story. I've always loved those kinds of stories because they are illustrative of where we need to be and what we need to be doing. And I think, at least for me, and I would bet just about everybody here, we have these moments where we're willing to just lay it all down, whatever it is. It doesn't matter. Let it all go, because I am here and I am true and I will not fail unequivocally. So thank you for your beautiful focus and your beautiful spirit. Just a joy to be with you, especially with you as you brought your thoughts to focus for all of us, and then that we could all amplify that exquisite substance. Thank you.
And I appreciated being taken back to stories of the temple. I'm a builder. I love hearing about these things and thinking in these terms. And Christina just said the real eye opener here is the necessity to simply let ourselves go. It may be to know about the past, to understand some of the difficulties that we might encounter in the present. But the fact of the matter is, my body is being rebuilt right now in a certain ways because of health, issues, you might say. And if, as I let myself go, and I do so actually with the support, but the knowledge, the understanding of my friends, it's amazing how we watch something totally new come about. Now, this is an individual sense that I'm talking about, but I think we can very easily, see the developing body as we have begun to know it in the same way that we We are witnesses to each other and support to each other and friends to each other. And together something is being built to the extent that we keep our hands off it. But not our love. Our love is intensely focused upon it, and that is exactly the way it should be. Shared, abundantly among all of us. And I see more and more of that happening too. Shared abundantly. And really, I see that's my understanding of the temple today. Thank you for bringing this to mind.
And I really appreciated the opportunity to listen to you for a while. I love hearing you speak. And I love the spirit of it. I mean, you raised some interesting questions. But really, it's the spirit of that's in our own heart that that really touches. And it carries through. It doesn't necessarily have to be something heavy necessarily, though there's power to it. But there's a certain ease that comes in a certain quality of spirit. And I think we've all touched that. I think that's what the attraction was. And it resonated with something in ourselves. Yeah, the truth, actually. Anyway, I just appreciated this opportunity today to listen and be with you actually in this way.
And I appreciated so many points that you brought today and the beautiful story and the detail. I had never heard that story in such detail. And it's a beautiful story. I think stories like that sometimes are seen as myth. They're so far in the past, as if they were just some sort of fairy tale or something that didn't apply to real life, to really what people are experiencing. And I just felt that what you brought things so vividly to awareness of the real life experiences of those people that were involved and the ones that had such responsibility and were sensing something that was of a true focus and true nature. And one of the things that you said that I really resonate with is that when you turn your attention away from the world of effects, and you basically, I think was Jesus said, go into your closet and close the door and come into that quiet space of communion with the Spirit of God in whatever way comes to your heart, you can think more clearly. Something comes through in thinking that doesn't come when we're all involved in a lot of external activity. And those things are very significant. Sometimes I think we people have imagined that, the prophets, it doesn't happen anymore that God speaks through people. But I think that's not true. It's just a matter of the magical process that you described so that can come into the earth vividly today. And so I thank you for that reminder and for that suggestion of what we can do to actually have more of an impact in the world, which is what I believe we have come to do. So thank you so very much.
And through the sharing of the story, there was a whirlwind of spirit on the move, activated, drawn into the present moment for us all to share. And I certainly did feel it and share it as you were speaking. There was a period of time in that part of the story that you didn't tell before Solomon, before David, before Saul, before Samuel, when the rulership of Israel was in the hands of ones who were called judges. Even the name sounds ominous. One has a sense that there was some heavy judging going on. In fact, it said there was no king in Israel, and every man did that which was right in his own eyes. But Samuel came on the scene, and he heard the voice of the Lord, and he changed the pattern. And that didn't work out, so he heard the voice and he changed it again, and he anointed a new King David. And one can feel in the story the gathering of essences and substances in a way like we're experiencing now. Rather, it all had form to it, but it was moving towards a culmination point where it would be given greater form through Solomon and through the drawing of the Queen of the South, so that there was a blending, and all the tithes began to be brought into the storehouse for another level of building of this temple representation. And we're, in a way, participating in the same thing now. Each one responsible for listening and hearing and bringing forth and bringing the tithes into the storehouse, that the riches might be used by the right ones at the right time, at the right point in the cycle, for a climactic and culminating cycle of building. We're moving in that now, and we recognize that now, and we have the advantage of all these stories from the past, and the leadership from the past, and the substance from the past. And it comes to us, comes to me in this whirlwind of the movement of the Spirit that was allowed to be present, and your voice used to bring it more clearly to consciousness. It is such a wonderful thing to be conscious of what is happening, enough of it while it is happening. And so it is for us. And it's been a precious time. I did not know what you were going to speak about this morning. And it surprised me and brought me great joy. And I love the slipstream that you have followed in here, hewing close to Grace and her Spirit in sharing these things in the beautiful way that you did, the beautiful woman that you are. Thank you so much. I praise the Lord for you in my life, in all our lives.
Any other comments that are bursting? Speak up. Otherwise, I'll just close our time just to say I really appreciate all the essences, as you were saying, David, that showed up in the temple. And I take responsibility for bringing it to focus and offering it upward. And I know what I wanted to bring here, which did have a lot to do with heart, a lot to do with passion, because that is the link that brings us into that sacred place. And there is a particular technology, design. That's what attracted me to talk about the temple. And obviously here we are in what we call the Temple of Light. So it was apropos. But I do know that as we use these times to bring that kind of soul, that kind of where we really live, where we really are in our lives, and bring it in. And yes, we let go of the stuff that is not that, but we do bring in our passion. And there is an opportunity in the temple to commune with the Lord. I find that a very fascinating way to look at it. So it's good to create the space so that the Lord can enter into it. There's room for him to move in it and do what he needs to do, and it will come through us, and it will be done by us, because that's why we're here. So thank you, and we look forward to our next time. I'll turn it over to Stu, though, who will bring us home.
Thank you so much, Anne, for such a wonderful time with you. And it is done by us with the power of God, the power of Source. I loved your words earlier speaking about the unfolding miracle that we are privileged to witness and take part of, and the magical means of God's control. And we are part of that, loving the Lord, letting that passion fill our hearts so that we may have communion with the Lord. And it's been wonderful to hear everyone speak, your voices, and we speak as one in certain ways. And don't we sing unto the Lord a new song? So let us move into our day, the rest of our day, the evening and the morning in some locations, holding these things in our hearts, minds, and beings, caring for the substance, and knowing that we're part of the ongoing cycles of creation, large and small. Our next Temple of Light service is going to be an extra special one, marking the 92nd anniversary of the Third Sacred School. And speaking will be Eugen Pack. That's going to be happening on September 15th in the evening, 8:30 p.m. Eastern Time, 5:30 p.m. Pacific Time, and 9:30 Monday morning in Seoul, South Korea. And now to close, we have one more piece of music created and performed by Gary Cortland Miles. It's entitled Cosmic Cycles.